The studio was buzzing with its usual energy, lights shimmering above, cameras sweeping across the stage, the host smiling, the audience applauding politely. It was meant to be a typical reunion segment, casual laughter, reminiscing jokes that didn't cross the line. But then Jungkook leaned slightly forward, gaze steady, voice soft yet carrying weight across the room. "Taehyung, will you come to my wedding?" The words landed like a stone dropped into calm water. Silence rippled through the studio, quieting everything. Even the hum of the lighting rig seemed to fade, as if the world itself had paused to give this moment its gravity. Taehyung's heart caught mid-beat. He blinked, not out of confusion, but because the question felt like it had always been waiting to be asked. Years, memories, unspoken truths condensed into a single, fragile line. The audience, the cameras, even the host, all frozen, waiting. There were no cue cards, no scripted lines for this. Only Jungkook, eyes open, patient, sincere, carrying the weight of a question that wasn't casual, that wasn't for show. Taehyung swallowed, feeling the familiar lump of emotion tighten. His mind raced, not fast enough to escape the moment, not fast enough to dodge the truth. He remembered everything: midnight dorm laughs, whispered confessions under dim lights, the arguments that left silence heavier than any scream. He began, voice low, almost swallowed by the quiet. But it wasn't hesitation. It was the careful weighing of years, the fragile art of speaking without breaking. I'm happy for you, Jungkook, truly." His words landed, gentle yet charged, the studio seemingly leaning in to hear more. Jungkook's expression didn't change, his patience unyielding, yet something softer, quieter flickered in his gaze. The host shifted slightly, sensing the tension, her voice caught in the weight of a moment that wasn't hers to manage. "Take your time," she whispered, though neither of them needed permission to pause. Taehyung's fingers dug lightly into the edge of the chair. Knuckles pale, other hand trembling slightly. Not out of fear, but because everything hung suspended. The past, the choices, the unspoken apologies. He looked at Jungkook, not the global superstar, not the face millions adored, but the boy who had been part of his life in ways that had left invisible scars. The boy who had once made him laugh harder than anyone and cry harder too. I wish I could have been there for so many things we missed," Taehyung said finally. His voice caught, barely audible, and he pressed his hands together to steady himself. "But will I come? Yes, I will." A faint smile crossed Jungkook's face. No applause erupted from the audience, no cheers from cameras, only the hush of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that some moments weren't meant to be interrupted by noise. Taehyung exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders in small increments. The weight of years didn't disappear, but it shifted, rebalancing in the delicate space between two people who had grown apart yet remained tethered by history. "I won't pretend it won't hurt," he added, soft but honest, "but I will be there." The studio held its breath. Even the host, searching for words, realized none could encapsulate the raw honesty between them. Jungkook's nod was gentle, almost imperceptible, but the understanding passed like electricity in the quiet air. For a long moment they just sat there, two figures surrounded by cameras and audience lights, yet entirely alone in a moment that belonged only to them. Memories flickered unbidden. Shared laughter, long nights rehearsing, whispered secrets, arguments that ended in silence heavier than words. Finally, Jungkook broke the stillness. "Thank you," he murmured. Not a public acknowledgement, not something for headlines, but a private, almost intimate recognition of the fragile bridge Taehyung had just crossed. Taehyung nodded, glancing around at the room briefly before returning his gaze. He felt the gravity of his own words, the acknowledgement of what had been lost and what had been preserved. The interview continued, the cameras rolling, the host asking lighter questions, the audience clapping politely. But something had shifted. Every laugh, every answer carried a subtle undercurrent now, a shared understanding that the past wasn't forgotten but it had found its place. The story was no longer one of speculation, of questions left in the air. It was a story of honesty, fragile yet unshakable. And as the cameras cut to commercial, Taehyung remained seated, hands loosely clasped in his lap, watching Jungkook across the set. There was still distance, still history, still unspoken emotions. But for the first time in years, it felt like something could finally breathe. Backstage, the hum of the studio's cooling system filled the empty corridors, a quiet contrast to the lingering tension on the set. Taehyung walked slowly toward a corner where bottled water and cue cards had been set aside, trying to collect himself. His hands were still trembling slightly, not from nerves, but from the rawness of what had just happened. Jungkook had asked a question that cut straight through years of silence, and answering it had pulled something fragile and honest to the surface. "Thirsty?" Taehyung asked softly, offering a bottle to Jungkook. Their fingers brushed as the handoff happened, fleeting, electric. Jungkook paused, accepting it with a small nod, and for a brief moment, the world outside the studio ceased to exist. "I didn't plan to ask," Jungkook admitted, voice low, almost apologetic. "It just slipped. Seeing you again made me realize I couldn't keep pretending. I needed to know where we stand." Taehyung's lips pressed together. He wanted to respond, to unpack everything, but words felt inadequate. He could feel the weight of Jungkook's gaze, steady, patient, expectant. "You needed to know if I was still important to you," he said finally, choosing honesty over comfort. Jungkook's eyes softened, a faint smile tugging at the corners. "You were never not important," he whispered, the words carrying years of history, of unspoken emotions. Taehyung exhaled slowly, the tension easing slightly. "Then why did I feel like you disappeared after Buin?" he asked, carefully choosing the word. "Why did you stop answering my calls?" Jungkook flinched, the memory raw. "You told me we needed space," he said, voice calm yet edged with regret. "I gave it to you longer than I should have. I wasn't ready, T. I didn't know what I wanted." Taehyung nodded, jaw tightening briefly before relaxing. "I was scared," he admitted softly. "Scared of what it meant, of how it made me feel when I sang your name in lyrics I wasn't ready to face." "I was scared too," Jungkook replied quietly, almost a confession to the air itself. "Angry because I thought we were on the same page. Then you pulled away like I was dangerous." "You were," Taehyung said, a bittersweet laugh escaping him. "Dangerous to everything I thought I knew about myself." The words were heavy but honest, unvarnished. He looked down, collecting his thoughts before meeting Jungkook's eyes again. "Now," Jungkook asked gently, "now what happens?" Taehyung extended a hand slowly, an invitation and a truce. "Now we tell the truth," he said, "even if it's through music, even if it's the last thing we ever do together." Jungkook didn't move for a moment, staring at the hand extended toward him. Then, finally, he took it, not forgiveness, not rekindling, but a pact, a recognition that the past existed but would not define the future. Later, in the dimly lit rehearsal room, the air thick with anticipation, they sat together in front of the piano, headphones resting around their necks. The track they had left unfinished years ago, "The Edge of Almost," played softly through the speakers. Every note, every chord carried memories. Laughter, tears, arguments, whispered confessions, moments of raw vulnerability. Taehyung watched Jungkook, remembering how easily their worlds had collided in their youth, two personalities clashing, complementing, igniting creative sparks that neither fully understood at the time. The song had been abandoned because neither of them was ready to confront the truths it revealed. Now, sitting side by side, the space between them felt both familiar and profoundly new. "This bridge," Jungkook murmured, pointing to a section in the track. "We never finished it because we couldn't agree how to end it." Taehyung nodded slowly, voice low. "And because we were afraid of what the lyrics meant. Every verse, every line, it reflected everything we didn't dare say." They spent hours refining the track, laughing softly at old inside jokes, debating phrasing, chord changes, phrasing again, all while rediscovering the rhythm of their partnership. But beneath the surface, each note carried emotion, nostalgia, Longing, closure, understanding. When the last note faded, they sat in silence, listening to the echoes. Words felt unnecessary. Their shared history had been expressed through music in a way speech never could. Taehyung exhaled, the weight of years easing slightly. "It hurts," he said softly, "but it's the right kind of hurt." Jungkook nodded. "The most honest we've ever been," he admitted. A quiet smile passed between them, not of rekindled romance, not of nostalgia, but recognition. Recognition that what they had shared was rare, beautiful, and formative. The next day, the engagement press event loomed. Taehyung could feel the buzz, the eyes, the cameras, all fixated on him. But it wasn't just about the announcement anymore. It was about what he and Jungkook had left unsaid and now, finally, expressed. He walked onto the stage in a crisp black suit, the melody of the song still humming in his mind. When asked about the mysterious co-writer of the engagement performance, he smiled thoughtfully. "Yes, someone very important," he said, glancing toward the balcony where Jungkook might be watching. "We hadn't worked together in a long time, but this moment felt incomplete without that history. Will he be here? He might be watching." The audience murmured, sensing the subtle tension, the private history layered beneath public smiles. Taehyung seated himself at the piano, introducing the piece. "This is called The Edge of Almost," he said softly. "It's about realizing that silence can be louder than goodbye." As his fingers pressed the keys, the room fell into quiet reverence. The melody was tender, reflective, haunted by the past yet unafraid of the present. Every note conveyed longing, every phrase a confession that only they fully understood. His voice floated gently, carrying the weight of years, the intimacy of shared histories, and the truth of unspoken emotions. The song ended in silence, fragile and profound, before applause erupted. But Taehyung's eyes were searching the balcony, looking for a presence he hadn't been sure would appear. Jungkook wasn't visible, but the thought of his understanding hovered in the room, unspoken yet present. Backstage, the energy shifted as they navigated the aftermath. Questions, smiles, polite chatter, it all felt secondary. The real moment had already happened, intimate, personal, indelible. After the press event, Taehyung retreated to a quiet corner of the venue, his mind buzzing with every fleeting expression he had seen on Jungkook's face during the performance. The applause, the camera flashes, the carefully orchestrated smiles, they all felt like echoes of something far more intimate, something that had existed long before any public spectacle. He sipped his water slowly, letting the cool liquid settle the lump in his throat. He thought about the first time he and Jungkook had sat down to work on that song years ago, when the world hadn't yet pulled them in different directions, when the weight of fame was lighter and their connection hadn't yet become layered with unspoken tension. The track had been a vessel for everything they couldn't say aloud: frustration, admiration, affection, regret. And now, finishing it felt like finally exhaling after holding a breath for too long. Taehyung's phone buzzed softly. A message from Jungkook. Did it feel right? He stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "Yes, more than I expected, but it's heavier than applause can carry." Later, after the media frenzy had subsided, Taehyung returned home to an apartment filled with quiet sunlight and familiar shadows. He placed his keys on the counter, lingering as he glanced around at the space that had always felt like a refuge from the constant scrutiny of the outside world. He picked up his guitar, running his fingers over the strings, feeling the tension and release of each note echo through him. The song still lingered in his mind, but now it carried clarity, not confusion. The next morning, while sorting through wedding details, Taehyung found himself staring at the seating chart. Names of family, friends, colleagues, and one spot he had kept intentionally flexible: Jungkook. He hadn't confirmed attendance yet, and Taehyung understood the weight of that decision. It wasn't just about presence. It was about closure, trust, and respect for the boundaries they had rebuilt. Taehyung's fiancée entered the room quietly, catching his thoughtful expression. "You're somewhere else," she observed gently. "I'm thinking about the past," he admitted softly. not with regret but with awareness, about people who shaped who I am now. She nodded, understanding. And him? She asked, voice measured but curious. Taehyung hesitated, then smiled faintly. He's part of that story, and I want to honor it honestly without letting it overshadow what we have. Later that evening, he found a quiet moment to call Jungkook directly. The phone rang twice before connecting. Hey, Jungkook's voice was low, familiar, carrying the same calm intensity it always had. Hey, Taehyung replied, letting the word linger. I wanted to say thank you for coming back, for finishing the song, for everything. Jungkook exhaled. I almost didn't, he admitted, but I realized some things are bigger than hesitation, and honestly I needed to see it through, for both of us. Taehyung nodded even though Jungkook couldn't see him. I felt that. Every note, every word. It meant more than I can explain. And he paused, searching for the right phrase. I want you to be comfortable at the wedding. No pretense, no forced smiles, just you. I wouldn't want it any other way, Jungkook replied softly. I'll come, but I'll be me, nothing more, nothing less. Their conversation hung in the air, unspoken emotions threaded between the words. It wasn't just about the wedding or the song. It was about acknowledging history, accepting change, and honoring a bond that had survived silence and distance. As the days passed, Taehyung became immersed in the rhythm of preparation, choosing flowers, confirming seating arrangements, reviewing the ceremony schedule. But his thoughts kept drifting to Jungkook. Each decision carried a small echo of him, a song lyric that resonated, a memory of laughter during late-night practice, a fleeting glance in a rehearsal room. One afternoon, while reviewing the rehearsal playlist, Taehyung's phone buzzed again. A picture message from Jungkook, a candid shot of the balcony at the venue, empty, sunlight streaming across the polished floor. The caption read simply, I'm watching, quietly. Taehyung smiled softly, replying, see you soon, no pressure. Rehearsals continued, each day blending meticulous planning with private reflection. Taehyung often found himself in quiet moments, gazing out the window at the city below, imagining the flow of the ceremony, the faces of those who mattered, and the one he hoped would witness it all without judgment or interference. On the evening before the wedding, Taehyung paused in the venue alone, rehearsing his vows in the quiet hum of the empty hall. He felt the gravity of the day ahead, public celebration intertwined with deeply personal reconciliation. Every word he would speak carried meaning beyond the surface, an acknowledgement of love, gratitude, and closure. He received a final text from Jungkook just before leaving for the evening. I'll be there, not for anyone else, just to witness. See you tomorrow. Taehyung's chest tightened, a mix of relief and anticipation. He replied, that's all I need. The morning of the wedding arrived with crisp sunlight filtering through the city. The venue buzzed with discreet energy, photographers, family, friends, yet Taehyung moved through it with calm focus. He adjusted his suit, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath, centering himself for the moment that would balance public celebration with private significance. As guests began to take their seats, he noticed Jungkook entering quietly, dressed simply, eyes scanning the room. Their gazes met briefly, an acknowledgement, a silent understanding of shared history and mutual respect. No words were necessary. Taehyung felt a sense of peace he hadn't anticipated. The past had been honored, the present embraced, and the future awaited. When the ceremony began, every detail unfolded seamlessly. Taehyung's vows were delivered with clarity and warmth, his voice steady. Each word carried layers of meaning, reaching beyond the immediate audience to the memories and emotions that had shaped him. He glanced once toward Jungkook, who stood discreetly near the back, presence unobtrusive yet profoundly grounding. After the ceremony, as celebration continued around them, Taehyung approached Jungkook quietly. Thank you, he said softly, voice low enough that only Jungkook could hear. Jungkook nodded, a small, genuine smile forming. You don't have to thank me. He replied, just glad to be here. Taehyung exhaled, the weight of years easing. "Me too," he whispered, a simple truth carrying decades of complexity. The two shared a final glance before Taehyung moved back to his new life, arms full of commitments, responsibilities, and love. Jungkook lingered for a moment, then disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind quiet affirmation that some connections endure, not to complicate the present, but to honor the journey that made it possible. The days after the wedding felt surreal for Taehyung. The public celebrations, the media coverage, the constant attention, he handled it with grace and composure. But behind closed doors, his thoughts often drifted back to Jungkook. It wasn't regret, not exactly. It was more a quiet awareness of what had been and what had shaped who he was today. He found himself replaying moments from the rehearsal, the song, the private glance exchanged during the ceremony. Every detail felt like a thread connecting the past to the present, a reminder that some bonds never truly fade. They simply adapt, shifting in form as life moves forward. Late one evening, after the last guest had left and the hall had returned to its empty calm, Taehyung sat alone at the piano in the reception venue. The soft click of the keys under his fingers echoed through the space, carrying a melody that had haunted him for years, the bridge from the song he and Jungkook had rewritten. His voice followed quietly, a whisper against the polished wood floors. The lyrics felt heavier now, yet purer, as if each note carried both closure and possibility. A knock at the door interrupted him. He turned to see Jungkook standing in the doorway, hands casually in his pockets, posture relaxed yet alert, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the hall lights. "I thought I'd come back for a second listen," Jungkook said softly. "Couldn't stop thinking about it." Taehyung nodded, gesturing to the piano. "Play with me." They sat side by side, fingers finding the familiar positions on the keys. Jungkook's voice blended seamlessly with Taehyung, not as a performance for an audience, but as two people reconnecting through shared history. Each verse, each chorus was no longer just music. It was dialogue, confession, reconciliation. When the final chord lingered in the air, the silence that followed was almost tangible. Taehyung closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of unspoken words settle. "It's strange," he said finally, "how something unfinished can carry more truth than anything we ever said." Jungkook's gaze was steady. "Because it wasn't about finishing," he replied. "It was about acknowledging, about being honest even when it hurts." Taehyung's hands rested lightly on the keys, the room warm with lingering resonance. "I thought I could move on without looking back, but I realize now it wasn't moving on I needed, it was understanding. Understanding us then and now." Jungkook leaned back slightly, a small knowing smile forming. "And do you?" Taehyung opened his eyes, meeting his gaze directly. "Yes, I understand, and I don't resent it. Not the past, not you, not the way things unfolded. Everything that happened led to here. Led to me knowing who I am, who I want to be." A pause hung between them, comfortable, heavy with shared acknowledgement. Then Jungkook shifted slightly. "You're happy though, right? With her?" Taehyung's lips curved into a soft smile, not forced, not cautious. "Yes, she's grounding. She makes me feel like I can be myself without performing. But that doesn't erase the significance of what we had or what we carry from it." Jungkook nodded. "I get that. I'm glad for you, for us, for what we've learned." The night passed with quiet conversation, reminiscing and laughter softened by nostalgia. They didn't dwell on old grievances or attempt to rewrite history. Instead, they spoke of growth, choices, and the rare, enduring clarity that comes from facing the truth. Over the next few weeks, Taehyung settled into the rhythm of married life while juggling professional commitments. Studio sessions, choreography rehearsals, and interviews filled his days, but he found pockets of reflection in between. The quiet morning coffee before the world woke, the late-night walks when the city felt empty and infinite, the brief messages exchanged with Jungkook that carried warmth without intrusion. One afternoon, while walking through the park near his home, Taehyung paused at a bench that had often been a place of solace. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos, memories of the two of them laughing in rehearsal rooms, late-night practice sessions, candid shots from tour. A wave of emotion hit him, a mix of gratitude and melancholy. A message from Jungkook popped up. Thinking of the bridge again, it's still perfect, still ours. Taehyung smiled, fingers hovering over the keyboard. It always will be, not because we keep playing it, but because we lived it. The conversation faded into comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't require immediate response. It was understanding, acknowledgement, and connection, all wrapped into a digital echo that carried far more meaning than words alone could convey. Days before the wedding anniversary, Taehyung reflected on the journey he had taken, the highs and lows, the music, the conversations, the moments of vulnerability that had never been captured on camera. The public saw celebration, elegance, and poise. The private moments, however, were far richer. Late-night piano sessions, laughter spilling into empty rehearsal rooms, the quiet reassurance of someone who had been there through it all. On the morning of their first wedding anniversary, Taehyung sat by the window, sunlight spilling across the floorboards. A note from Jungkook arrived unexpectedly. Almost a year, almost perfect. Thank you for letting me witness it all. Almost feels complete now. Taehyung smiled softly, a warmth spreading through him that was gentle, enduring, and deeply human. He typed back, almost is enough, always has been. He leaned back, eyes closing briefly as he let the weight of the past year settle. Music, memories, and honesty had brought him here, and in that stillness he felt a quiet, unshakable peace. Later that evening, at a small, private gathering with family and close friends, Taehyung caught sight of Jungkook across the room. They exchanged a subtle nod, a quiet acknowledgement of shared history and mutual respect. No words were necessary. It wasn't about rekindling what had been lost. It was about honoring what had shaped them and moving forward with clarity and grace. The night ended with laughter, conversation, and music, but the most profound moments were quiet, unseen by the world. Taehyung understood that closure wasn't about dramatic gestures or public declarations. It was about understanding, respect, and the willingness to witness another person's presence without expectation or judgment. As the room emptied, Taehyung lingered by the window once more, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The song, the wedding, the conversations, the shared glances, they were threads woven into the fabric of his life. And through it all, one truth remained clear. Some bonds are timeless, not because they remain constant, but because they leave an imprint on who you become. Taehyung picked up his guitar again, fingers brushing lightly over the strings. A new melody emerged, soft and tentative, carrying echoes of the past while reaching toward the future. For the first time in years, the music felt unburdened, alive, and wholly his own. He leaned back, closing his eyes, letting the sound fill the room, fill him, fill the space where memories and growth converged. The chapter with Jungkook had ended, yes, but it had ended with truth, honesty, and respect. And in that ending, Taehyung realized there was freedom, warmth, and the promise of everything still to come. The weeks after the wedding settled into a rhythm of gentle reflection for Taehyung. Life, public and private, continued in its usual patterns, but the echoes of what had been, the questions, the song, the intimate moments with Jungkook, lingered quietly in the background. He found himself revisiting small gestures from that time. The way Jungkook had listened to every note during the recording session, the subtle nods when a lyric hit exactly where it should, the way their hands had brushed while adjusting microphone stands. None of it was monumental to the outside world, but to Taehyung, each moment felt like proof of a truth that had been hard-earned. Connection was never erased, only reshaped. One afternoon, while in the studio reviewing new arrangements for his solo project, Taehyung's phone buzzed with a message from Jungkook. Almost feels complete now, right? He smiled softly, setting down his pen and typed back. Yes, almost always has been enough. Thank you for being part of it. It wasn't a declaration of rekindled feelings, nor an attempt to rewrite the past. It was acknowledgement. It was respect for what had shaped them, and the quiet reassurance that some bonds endure simply by existing. The anniversary of the wedding arrived. Taehyung reflected on the year, the growth, the music, the laughter, the occasional pangs of nostalgia. He remembered the glances exchanged, the words spoken in private, the shared moments that no camera had captured. He understood now that closure wasn't about erasing the past. It was about carrying it with grace, letting it inform the present without weighing it down. On that evening, he sat by the window of his apartment, guitar in hand, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. He strummed softly, experimenting with a new melody. Each note seemed to breathe, carrying remnants of old songs while reaching toward something unspoken yet promising. A quiet knock interrupted him. He looked up to see Jungkook at the door, casual and unassuming, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes reflecting the ambient glow of the city outside. No words were needed. Their understanding didn't require explanation. "Mind if I sit?" Jungkook asked quietly. "Of course," Taehyung replied, gesturing to the empty space beside him. They spent hours together that night, revisiting old riffs, laughing at misremembered lyrics, quietly observing how far they'd come. Each chord, each harmony, was a conversation, a testament to the honesty that had finally found its place between them. When silence settled again, Taehyung leaned back, letting his fingers rest on the strings. "It's strange," he said softly, "how something unfinished can carry more truth than anything we ever said." Jungkook smiled, eyes glinting, because it wasn't about finishing. It was about being honest even when it hurt. Taehyung nodded, absorbing the simplicity of that truth. "I thought I could move on without looking back," he admitted. "But I realize now it wasn't moving on I needed, it was understanding. Understanding us then and now." "And do you?" Jungkook asked, voice steady. "Yes," Taehyung said, meeting his gaze directly. "I understand, and I don't resent it. Not the past, not you, not the way things unfolded. Everything that happened led to here. Led to me knowing who I am, who I want to be." They shared a quiet moment, sitting side by side, letting memories and music fill the space between them. The connection was no longer urgent or tumultuous. It was calm, respectful, and profound. Days passed, and Taehyung focused on his life, balancing career, married life, and the quiet reflections of the past. He remained in contact with Jungkook, though their interactions were measured, careful, full of warmth but without expectation. Each message, each phone call, felt like a small acknowledgement of the shared history that had shaped them both. One evening, while reviewing fan responses to his new music, Taehyung paused at a message that caught his attention. "Your song with Jungkook, it's like a diary of emotions we never got to hear. It's beautiful." He smiled, remembering how vulnerable they had been during the recording, how every note had carried a fragment of truth. Later that night, he reflected on the past year. The wedding, the song, the conversations, they had all led to understanding, to growth, to a quiet acceptance of what had been and what could never be. He realized that closure wasn't a single moment or a single word. It was a series of choices, actions, and honest conversations that allowed the heart to rest. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Taehyung sipped coffee, glancing at the wedding invitation displayed neatly on the table. It had become a symbol not of what was lost, but of what endured: friendship, respect, and shared experience. He picked up his phone, typing a message to Jungkook. "Thank you for being part of this journey. For the music, for the honesty, for the almost perfect moments." A reply came swiftly. "Always. Some stories aren't about endings, they're about understanding." Taehyung smiled, feeling a quiet sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy. The emotions hadn't always been simple. But through music, honesty, and respect, they had navigated the complexity together. The past wasn't forgotten. It was honored, understood, and woven into the person he had become. That evening, as he looked out over the city lights, guitar resting beside him, he felt a profound clarity. Love, friendship, and connection didn't always need dramatic closure. Sometimes, they simply needed acknowledgement, honesty, and the courage to let go without losing the lessons learned. And in that stillness, Taehyung understood that the moment with Jungkook, the question, the song, the shared glances, would always remain a touchstone in his life. Not as a wound, not as regret, but as a testament to honesty, growth, and the enduring power of connection. He leaned back, letting the soft hum of the city wash over him, fingers brushing lightly over the strings. The music that emerged was calm, reflective, and alive with possibility. It carried the echoes of yesterday, the peace of today, and the quiet promise of tomorrow. The chapter with Jungkook had ended, not with heartbreak or drama, but with truth. And in that truth, Taehyung found freedom, clarity, and a profound sense of peace. He picked up a pen, jotting down a lyric inspired by the journey. Some moments aren't meant to last forever, but they shape everything we are. It wasn't just about the song. It was about life, friendship, love, and the quiet beauty of understanding. Taehyung closed his notebook, set it aside, and looked toward the horizon. The city shimmered with possibilities. The future was waiting, bright and uncharted. And for the first time in a long time, he felt fully ready to embrace it, all of it, with honesty, grace, and an open heart. The night deepened and he finally rested, the soft glow of the streetlights casting warmth over the room. Music, memories, and reflection had brought him here, to a place of quiet contentment, understanding, and acceptance. The chapter with Jungkook was over, yes, but it had ended with respect, love, and truth. And that was more than enough.